In October 2025, President Donald Trump made a very important announcement. He signed a special paper called a presidential proclamation. This paper officially changed how the United States observes a key federal holiday. Before this, the country had recognized two holidays on the same day, Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. This way of honoring both had started during the previous government. But with his new proclamation, President Trump ended this dual recognition. He made it clear that we're calling it Columbus Day, meaning it would be the only federal holiday observed. He also shared a strong message with Italian Americans, saying, "We're back, Italians." People in his cabinet and reporters who were there clapped loudly when he announced this. This showed that there was strong support for his decision from some groups. However, this change was more than just simple words on paper. It immediately caused a lot of talk and disagreement across the United States. Some people were very happy, seeing it as a way to honor a long-standing tradition and Italian-American history. They felt it was important to celebrate Christopher Columbus. But others, especially leaders and members of indigenous communities, felt sad and upset. They saw it as ignoring the hard truths of history and the pain their ancestors faced. This action by President Trump brought to light a deep and ongoing cultural battle in America. It showed how much people disagree about what parts of history are most important to remember, and how the country should define itself. This proclamation became a key moment, setting the stage for a closer look at America's long fight over history, identity, and the meaning of its holidays. 2. The first Columbus Day. Columbus Day has a long history in the United States. Its story began many years after Christopher Columbus sailed to the Americas. The first time the country observed Columbus Day was in 1892. President Benjamin Harrison made a special announcement for this one-time celebration. This announcement came after a very sad event. In New Orleans, a group of 11 Italian immigrants were killed. This created big problems between the United States and Italy. President Harrison's declaration of Columbus Day was a way to help calm these problems. It also showed that America wanted to accept Italian people who came to live there. For many Italian Americans, this day became important. It helped them feel like a part of the country. For a long time, Italian Americans celebrated Columbus Day on their own. It was a day to remember their heritage and contributions, but it was not yet a national holiday. In 1934, President Franklin D. Roosevelt took a step further. He made the first official presidential announcement for Columbus Day. He set the date as October 12th. However, it took even more years for Columbus Day to become a full federal holiday. This big change happened in 1968. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed a new law. This law made Columbus Day a national holiday for everyone. It started in 1971. The law also moved many holidays to Mondays. This created long 3-day weekends which helped people have more time off. Since then, Columbus Day has been celebrated on the second Monday in October. This history shows how a day meant to help a community became a federal holiday for the whole nation. 3. A day for Native people. In the 1900s, a new idea began to grow across the United States. Many Native American people and their supporters felt a strong need for a different kind of national holiday. They believed that honoring Christopher Columbus was wrong. Instead, they wished for a day to celebrate Indigenous peoples, who were the first inhabitants of the Americas. This wish started what became known as the Indigenous Peoples Day movement. The formal idea for this new day came from an important international meeting. In 1977, the United Nations held a conference. This meeting focused on the problem of discrimination against indigenous populations around the world. From this discussion, the call for a dedicated Indigenous Peoples Day became much louder and clearer. Years later, in 1992, a significant change took place in the United States. The city of Berkeley, California, led the way. It became the first city to officially replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. This was a very important moment because it marked the 500th anniversary of Columbus's arrival in the Americas. Berkeley's decision showed a growing desire to remember and teach American history in a more honest and complete way. As the movement grew, more people started to examine Columbus's historical actions closely. Scholars, who are experts in history, looked at many old documents. They found detailed information, sometimes even in Columbus's own diary entries. These records often described Columbus and his men acting with great cruelty. They showed that Native people were enslaved, hurt, and killed. For example, historical papers tell how Native Americans had their hands cut off if they failed to bring enough gold. They also detailed how young girls were forced into sexual slavery. This evidence painted a very different picture of Columbus than the traditional story. This deep research led to a clearer understanding of the terrible impact of colonization on Native populations. Today, many academics agree on the devastating effects. Dr. Leo Kilsback, a university professor and a member of the Northern Cheyenne tribe, has explained these facts. He pointed out that Columbus's own diaries show he and his men did most inhumane and grotesque atrocities against Native men, women, and children. The numbers show a very sad truth. When Columbus first arrived on the island that is now Haiti and the Dominican Republic in 1492, there were about 250,000 indigenous people living there. By 1500, only about 500 of them were still alive. By 1650, the entire native population on that island had been completely wiped out. This tragic loss of life and culture is now a widely accepted historical fact. which helped strengthen the Indigenous Peoples Day movement, pushing for wider recognition and a more truthful telling of history. 4. A time of two holidays. In 2021, President Joe Biden made an important decision. He was the first American president to officially recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. This was a big moment for Native American people across the country. However, President Biden did not remove Columbus Day from the federal calendar. Instead, he took a different path. President Biden chose to issue two separate proclamations. One was for Indigenous Peoples Day, the other was for Columbus Day. This way, the federal government acknowledged both holidays. It was an effort to recognize different parts of American history at the same time. This approach was new for a U.S. president. For Indigenous Peoples Day, President Biden's message was clear. He spoke about the strong spirit of Native people. He recognized their lasting positive impact on American society. His words also remembered the past. For many years, federal policies tried to change or remove Native cultures. They also tried to displace Native people from their lands. This proclamation aimed to honor Native resilience despite those harms. For Columbus Day, President Biden's message also had two parts. He asked people to think about America's spirit of exploration. He also honored the bravery and gifts of Italian Americans through many years. Columbus Day had been important for Italian American identity for a long time. But in the same message, President Biden also spoke of the painful history of wrongs and atrocities that European explorers caused. He mentioned the suffering they brought to tribal nations and indigenous communities. So, for a time, the federal government tried to hold two different views of history. It tried to respect both Italian American history and the difficult past of indigenous communities. President Biden's actions created a temporary balance. This balance aimed to honor many stories in the nation. It was a time when the federal government tried to listen to different voices and histories. This meant both holidays, Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day, received official federal recognition. This helped to set a new, balanced federal standard for these important days. 5. Trump's new rule. President Donald Trump made a new decision in October 2025. He signed an official paper known as a proclamation. This proclamation changed the federal holiday for Columbus Day. During a public event, President Trump said, "We're calling it Columbus Day," and "We're back, Italians." This meant the government would no longer officially recognize Indigenous Peoples Day alongside Columbus Day. This was a clear change from the previous administration's approach. President Trump's proclamation used very strong and direct words. It described Christopher Columbus as the original American hero. It stated Columbus was a giant of Western civilization and one of the most gallant and visionary men to ever walk the face of the earth. These powerful words clearly showed the president's high regard for Columbus and his historical role. The proclamation also strongly criticized those who questioned Columbus's legacy. It spoke about left-wing radicals who were trying to erase our history and slander our heroes. It mentioned actions like pulling down statues and damaging monuments.
President Trump declared, "Under my leadership, those days are finally over." He stated with certainty that Columbus was a true American hero and that all citizens were eternally indebted to his relentless determination. This action was a key part of President Trump's larger plan, often called a culture war agenda.
He wanted to challenge what his administration called woke policies and narratives. The Columbus Day Proclamation fit well into this broader effort. It aimed to shape how America views and tells its own history, emphasizing traditional interpretations. The president's actions regarding Columbus Day were connected to other policies. His administration also worked on initiatives to restore truth and sanity to American history. This included a comprehensive review of the Smithsonian Institution. The goal was to remove what the administration considered divisive or partisan narratives from how history is presented to the public. Additionally, other policies aimed to make English the official language of the United States. The administration also sought to reduce or eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs across federal agencies. These steps together showed a determined effort to redefine America's historical narrative and cultural identity. The president believed these changes were essential for the country's future. Aside 6. Different feelings. President Trump's new rule about Columbus Day brought different feelings across the country. Major Italian-American organizations were very happy. Groups like the Conference of Presidents of Major Italian-American Organizations, or COPOMIAO, and the National Italian-American Foundation, or NIAF, openly supported President Trump's decision. They were pleased that Columbus Day was once again the only federal holiday in October. Basil Russo, who leads COPOMIAO, said that putting different groups against each other was not a true answer. He explained that having two holidays on the same day, or getting rid of Columbus Day, was just a political choice, not a real solution. Italian Americans feel that Columbus Day is important because it honors their community's history and their many contributions to America. It reminds them of their struggles and their journey to be accepted in the United States. They see the holiday as a key part of their cultural identity. These organizations also said they supported a day for Indigenous peoples. However, they believe this day should be on a different date, not on the same day as Columbus Day. For example, they suggested Native American Heritage Day, which is the Friday after Thanksgiving, or August 9, the date the United Nations set for International Indigenous Peoples Day. This shows they want to respect Native American heritage, but still keep Columbus Day special for Italian Americans. Some studies showed that Italian Americans often have mixed thoughts about Columbus himself, but they still strongly approve of Columbus Day as a way to celebrate their own heritage. For Native American leaders, President Trump's proclamation brought disappointment, but not surprise. They saw it as a step backward for their people. Jonathan Nez, who was formerly the president of the Navajo Nation, said that such actions pushed them back to a time when indigenous peoples were not respected. He said it felt like they were not even seen as human beings. But Native American leaders showed strong spirits, and renewed determination. Brian Newland, a citizen of the Bay Mills Indian community, said that the work to get Indigenous recognition does not stop with just one president. He called it generational work, meaning it is a long fight that continues across many years. Senator Shane Morigeau, a Native American leader from Montana, explained that it is about teaching accurate history. He said that once people learn the real effects of Columbus on Indigenous peoples, they cannot forget it. He added that they are not trying to remove Columbus from history, but to teach a complete and truthful history. Native American communities also expressed concerns about other policies by President Trump's administration. They felt these policies often went against Indigenous rights. For example, changing back some traditional Indigenous place names. This new Columbus Day decision added to their worries. However, despite these setbacks, Native American leaders promised to continue their efforts to gain full respect and recognition for their history and their people. They stand firm in their long fight for justice and truth. 7. A country split in two. The country saw many different ways of celebrating the October holiday. The federal government had made its choice, but each state and city could decide for itself. This led to a mix of traditions across the United States. For example, by 2023, only 16 states and American Samoa still recognize the day only as Columbus Day. This showed that many places had already changed their holiday practices. Some states, like Minnesota, Alaska, Vermont, and Oregon, had completely stopped celebrating Columbus Day, choosing Indigenous Peoples Day instead. Other states, such as Alabama, Nebraska, and Rhode Island, chose to observe both holidays. Their goal was to recognize Italian-American history and the important experiences of Native American communities. Over 200 cities across the country also changed the holiday, either replacing Columbus Day or honoring both. This showed that federal policy did not fully control local choices. States and cities have the power to make their own decisions about holidays. However, federal decisions like paid holidays for federal workers or flag observances still have some influence. People across the nation held very different ideas about Christopher Columbus and the holiday. Surveys showed Americans were deeply divided. A 2024 YouGov survey found that 45% of Americans viewed Columbus favorably, while 33% viewed him unfavorably. These opinions often depended on a person's age, race, and political beliefs. Older Americans were much more likely to think Columbus was a good person. About 40% of those aged 45 and older saw him positively, compared to 27% of younger adults. White Americans also had more positive views, 40%, than Black Americans, 25%, Hispanic Americans, 27%, or other racial groups, 17%. The political divide was even stronger. 52% of Republicans thought Columbus was good, but only 23% of Democrats and 29% of independents agreed. This deep division was clear in how news was reported.
Conservative media praised the federal government's decision, saying it brought back traditional American values. Liberal media, on the other hand, were critical. They focused on the historical harm Columbus caused to Indigenous peoples and stressed the importance of Indigenous Peoples Day. This showed that the debate was about more than history. It was about politics and different beliefs about the country's story. These different views truly showed a country split in two. 8. What happens next? The country now faces a clear choice. There are strong feelings about how America should remember its past. Some people want to celebrate Christopher Columbus. They see him as a brave explorer and a hero, especially for Italian Americans who found acceptance through the holiday. Other people want to honor Indigenous Peoples Day. They wish to remember the native people who lived here for thousands of years and faced great hardship after Columbus arrived. This difference shows a deep disagreement about America's story and whose experiences should be most important. For schools, this creates a big challenge. Teachers must find ways to tell a full and fair story. How can they teach about Columbus's voyages without ignoring the pain and suffering he brought to native communities? How can they teach about native history and culture while also showing the important contributions of Italian Americans? It is important to teach history accurately, not just one side. This means students need to learn about different views and complex truths about the past. Many younger Americans already show more support for Indigenous Peoples Day. The future of American memory is still being made. The debate about these holidays is about more than just one day a year. It is about who America is and how it defines its identity. It asks how the nation will make sure all its people feel seen, valued, and respected. To build a truly inclusive future, the country must understand every part of its complex past. This means looking at both the good and difficult parts. Many hope for a time when different cultures can share their stories, find common ground, and build a stronger nation together. What do you think is the best way for schools to teach about both Christopher Columbus and Indigenous peoples' history in America?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.